And the very first person up is Eleanor. I'll let you say what you do and do your world. Sure.
I hope I can project over the crickets. I'm not a designer. I am the child of a designer, but I am a community manager and a marketer and a community builder as well as a writer. So you could say, I guess I design communities, which I just thought of while Chris was talking. But since we're by a campfire, I thought I would start by telling you all a story, because storytelling. Stories, we're by a campfire, which will hopefully relate to our theme. So this story starts in the 1990s in rural Maine when I was a teenager, and I was really into punk and rock and roll, and unsurprisingly, there was not a lot of people around me like me into the things I was. I know that's shocking. And this was like the era of AOL Instant Messenger, so pre-Web 2.0. But because I liked records and music, I discovered zines. And since we are around designers, just how many people know what a zine is? Like, just raise your hand. Okay, cool, yes. So for those of you who don't know, a zine is a small, self-published magazine. Lately, they've been taken up by kind of art school folks, and they're very arty and designy, but when I was a teenager, it was really about cut and paste and photocopy, and they were like these sloppy, handmade things. Maybe you banged it out on a typewriter or you hand wrote it, and it was really about a cheap way to get your ideas out to a wider world. So when I discovered zines as this sort of budding feminist, like punk rocker anarchist, I was like, holy shit, there are other people in the world that are like me, and they have opinions, and they are publishing them and sharing them with other people. And it was sort of like this alien world from the rural world that I grew up in. So, of course, I had to start one. Like, that was obvious. I was a writer. I always wanted to be published, but I was a teenager in Maine. Like, who was going to do that? So, in beginning to put out my own writing, it started this whole dialogue with people all around the country and all around the world that lived in places like Mountain View, Arkansas, actually, or Memphis, Tennessee, places I'd never been and had no idea about or what it was actually like to grow up there, especially as a young woman. And this whole dialogue and community started. And to me, it wasn't just about putting out my voice, but listening to voices that were so much different than mine. And really sometimes feeling uncomfortable about what people were saying and expressing and reading it, but having to sit with that and then having to craft a response, whether that was through a letter or an article in my own zine. So, this is slower. Now we have like this rapid instant response on the internet, but you could like sit down and write someone a letter, which I suggest you try sometime because it's actually really gratifying as a way to do this. But zines were fun, they were joyful, but they were a lot of fucking work, right? Like, have you typed an article on a typewriter lately? It's really painful. I don't think I'll do it again. But to me, the zines became not just about the writing and the design, but about the community that was around that, especially the community of, again, a word that gets thrown around a lot, but a very diverse young women who had a lot of political opinions and ideas. And for me, that was what I really started to like as much as the actual physical object of the publications themselves. So when I graduated from high school, I hightailed it to the other Portland, Oregon, because Portland, Maine was first, I just have to have you know that, where I started organizing zine community events, because there was a lot of people also making zines there. So we started a zine symposium in 2001. It lasted, I think, almost a decade, which was really gratifying for me. But again, this was a lot of work. So you're like, so where's the play in this? We weren't getting paid, but it was still a lot of work. But what I found in zines and the zines community was it was kind of this nexus of like personal passion. Like I was passionate about writing, and I was also passionate about listening to or hearing or absorbing other people's stories, as well as telling my own. There was a political purpose attached to it. So for me, whether it was through the zine community or organizing events, it was about empowering and creating a conclusive space where people could talk through ideas. And it wasn't always a comfortable space, but an inclusive space, whether that was through text or writing or design or an event, such as this one. And it was also about professional ambition. Like, make no bones about it, I was gonna be a fucking writer, right? Like, someday someone else would publish my shit. Still working on that one. I did have a book come out, have another one, but it's always a process. And I think for that it was about like building a sustainable life. Like, okay, I love this stuff, but like, how is it going to continue to support me as I get older? But from that nexus, I sort of used that to move forward in my life. So I've been reading that book, literally called Designing Your Life. It's by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. They work at the Stanford D School. Ooh, another thing to articulate over. So they talk about play as something you do for like the pure joy of it. It's just something you like love, and you don't have that maybe professional ambition to it. So like right now I play soccer. I don't know if they would call that play because like you're trying to win. I'm also on the fit tip right now. Like I play soccer so I can eat pizza, duh. But it is really joyful and doesn't really serve a purpose. Like I don't care if my team is winning or not, but we are right now, so that's cool. Anyway, so I'm also from New England. Like we just like have to have purpose or else we feel useless. So I thought about, for me, being joyful and being playful is also having a purpose. And so using this like nexus of like the personal passion, political purpose, and professional ambition, I've used that to guide the work I do and also the sort of personal projects that I take on. So for me, like work and play isn't about like, finding your passion or like having fun at work, whatever. I work in startups. They fucking suck sometimes. Like they're not fun. Where is my Razor scooter and free snacks? Give it to me. And it's not about that dumb advice of like, find work you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah, whatever. It's about like doing what you do with integrity. So this nexus is guiding me to what I want and what I don't want, and saying like, okay, I've been doing this thing, but it doesn't work for me anymore, like time to go. So I started my career after college, after this zine symposium things, in museum education, and you might be like, what? But for me, museums were this social space where you could have political conversations around culture and around a space that was inclusive for a lot of people. I worked at the Brooklyn Museum for almost 5 years. It's located at the crossroads of a lot of different neighborhoods in Brooklyn. You have like Hasidic Jewish people, Caribbean and African American people, kind of yuppie, white people over here. So there's a lot of different cultures just around that. And then if you expand out to New York City. So thinking about like through education, through events, like how do you make the museum a space where people can feel safe to have these brave conversations, where they see themselves represented? That's what I wanted to do, and that's what guided me to museum work. But then, having worked with a lot of artists at the museum, I realized there was a lot of things artists needed to help them create sustainable lives. So I shifted a bit to work at a foundation called the New York Foundation for the Arts, helping artists raise money and plan projects. And I spent a lot of time listening to artists, again, to try to figure out, like, where was this nexus of, like, passion and purpose for them? How could I help? Like, how could I give back to that? How can I be welcoming to them? This was in 2011, like crowdfunding was new, so I had to become an expert in crowdfunding really quickly, because what I heard artists saying to me is like, I'm not getting grants, I need money, like how do I do this? I've heard about Kickstarter, what is that, how do I do it? And I was like, I don't know, and then I was like, okay, I better know. So again, this listening and being guided by this nexus of like passion and purpose and ambition, guiding me to that career. And that also led me to writing a book about it. So my first book did come out in 2013, actually put out by a person I've worked on the zine symposium with. So I always say, like, when you're building community, when you're operating with this nexus of integrity, you don't stay in touch with people because like maybe they'll help you professionally later. You stay in touch with them because you like what they're doing and they respect you. And then when you have a project you can collaborate on, it works. So Microcosm Publishing released a book I wrote helping creative people think about business in hopefully a welcoming and creative way in 2013, and it's called Grow. And it also grew out of me listening to the zine community I was part of like growing up and hearing their struggles as creative people and saying like, okay, what do you need to know from the business side to keep going? But after that, I felt like the arts weren't moving as fast as me, so I shifted into working in tech and startups and community. And there I really felt like, hey, these tech startups I'm working in, I started a 3D printing startup. A lot of designers use it. It's called Shapeways. You can make cool 3D printed stuff. I have some 3D printed jewelry on. You can ask me about it later. But for me, my shift to tech was really about like having a passion for opening technology to a greater amount of people where it could be an empowering thing. And you could find people are very, very passionate in tech, but there's a lot of barriers to entry, even if we sometimes think there isn't. So for me, as a community manager and a marketing person, I'm really thinking about like, how do we make this accessible and all this exciting new stuff like open to the widest amount of people possible? And again, it comes back to listening, like thinking about the stories. So when women or people from underrepresented racial or ethnic groups tell me about their stories in tech and working in tech or trying to get into it, I listen. And as a community and marketing person, I say like, okay, what can I do to help you, to be a resource? You know, is it giving you space for an event? Is it sponsoring something you've done? Is it trying to find scholarship money for you to do a certain program? Like, what can I do, again, to make this thing that is so exciting, like, wider and wide open to a greater amount of people? So coming back to this work and play nexus, again, I've done a lot of things. I'm always looking for the next thing, right? But it's always about that crossroads for me of like personal passion, political purpose, and wherever you find that, and then professional ambition. And I think if you can find that for yourself and use it to guide you, like you may take some directions that might not make sense linearly, but you will be, you know, if we're talking about designing your life and feeling like you live, you work, you play with integrity. So that's what I got. Thanks.
What was your first zine called?
So I started my first zine with my best friend Ariel. We called it Random. Yeah. And then I made a personal zine called Indulgence, which I suppose is still publishing.
The one-word title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, it was 1997, you know. But yeah, Indulgence is like, oh, personal writing. It's so self-indulgent.
So then the person you worked on with Random or Indulgence, one of the two, came back around to help you publish Grow?
Person I'd worked with organizing the Portland Zine Symposium out in Oregon, came around. I pitched it to him. I was like, hey, you publish all these books helping people like silkscreen print better, grow an organic garden. It's cool. What if they wanted to like make it a business or like make it their life? What do they do? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
cool.
He thought that was a good idea.
Where do you buy it?
Oh, good question. I forgot my copy, so you can get it on Amazon.
Nice. It has an ISBN.
Yeah, it's like a real book. Or microcosmpublishing.com.
Microcosm Publishing.
You should order it from Microcosm. I think my royalties pay. Or if you want to Venmo me some money, I'll send you one.
I think
really good. I work in marketing.
Venmo.com/random.
No! I think that's the first time I've admitted I love my first zine.
Nothing like a campfire.
That's right. And I'm only 1.5 glasses of
So
wine in.
one of it was, what about, I think some of us agree that maybe your second book title, which I think you're working on, should be maybe called Doing What You Do with Integrity.
Ooh.
That was a good line from your thing.
Thank you.
But you can call it whatever you want.
I'm working on a second book. It's a feminist memoir I mean,
yeah,
maybe instead of being like, shut up and fucking hire women and people of color, it's just like, Also, join me on my podcast called WTF is Your Startup. No, I haven't.
It fucking sucks sometimes.
Yeah, it does. It's horrible.
There's a lot of quotable lines in the top. So what are the reason you ever have a zine? I don't think I've ever, sadly, wasn't part of the zine culture, but wish I was. If I could go back in time and do something right, it would have been 5 zines. I still can.
There's
it's still
so
a thing.
many zine fests now. It's amazing.
Zine fest. So when you have one, the point of having one is like, I have some shit to say, and I'm gonna write it down on a piece of paper and say it.
Yeah.
And you want to grow it, though, right? Part of the purpose is you want as many people in the absolute world to read it, right? What are the no?
It depends. I think that's a good question. I think some people like zines because they can say like, I'm making 100 of these, and that's it.
It's a limited run.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you can say, yeah, I'm gonna just like photocopy it and like put it at the record store, and whoever takes them, or the grocery store, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whoever takes them.
I want my voice to go in, but maybe only 100 times.
Right. Yeah. It's like can be safe. It's like a safety thing sometimes.
Yeah, and it's your choice to grow beyond that.
I mean, you also, if you're all designers and printmakers, you can do like cool limited edition handmade stuff. You know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good story. Thanks, Eleanor.
Thanks, man.